Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the weekly live stream for the Restitutor Orbis channel. And as always, I'm your host, Lucius Aurelian, and thank you for joining me as we indulge in another one of these theoretical explorations that are always quite intriguing. And today we're going to explore the fate of the world, or what it may potentially be. And I'd like to extend a greeting to all viewers, prime explorers, and all others joining us. All are welcome here. And really the purpose of this exploration is to try to get an idea of what the fate of the world may be. Now, little caveat or note before we dive into it, this is completely a theoretical exploration. I know we're not going to get any hard facts out of this, so you might ask the question, well, why do we bother doing it? Because it's important to consider what our hard facts might be and where we are. And what I wanted to start with for our first topic is the Battle of Ventry. Now, for those of you who don't know, what is the Battle of Ventry? Officially, it is a mythical battle that occurred sometime in the distant past. It is not a historically documented or acknowledged battle. It's from Irish folklore, Irish myth. And yet, for some reason, despite the fact that this is not a historical event, it's myth that seems to be on the verge of being lost. There's a few different versions of it. There's some surviving poems that go back 150, 200 years. There's probably about 4 distinct versions. We've discussed this battle a couple times on the channel, most notably in the King of the World exploration, where we were trying to ascertain if there was actually a King of the World in the past. And that's actually the entire plot behind the myth, the folklore, the story, the Battle of Ventry. And one of the intriguing things about it is, much like with the Roman battles that were informed are historical and are historically acknowledged events and very quote-unquote well-documented, we do have a lot of similar old Middle Ages or medieval paintings, however you want to ascribe them, that apparently depict the Battle of Ventry. Very strange. Now, is it possible that these paintings were done in the 1800s, in the early 1900s, and then attributed to that time frame? Yes, anything is possible. But when you look at a painting like this, this is depicting the aftermath of the Battle of Ventry. And if you're not familiar with it, the Fianna, the warrior band of Ireland, or Hibernia, or whatever we're referring to it today, there's many different names for it, stood up to the forces of the King of the World. Basically, it wasn't even a unified Ireland fending off the rest of the world, because when they say King of the World in the myth, they mean King of the World. Now, what exactly do you think when you see an image like this? Have you seen other paintings like this that are attributed from the medieval time frame, the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, whatever we're calling it today, basically any time from 1100 to 1700, just a short 600-year time frame? What are your feelings when you see paintings like this? Are these really historically accurate paintings, whether they're showing events that are historically documented, like name any Roman battle, the Battle of Zama perhaps, or any one of the great battles of the Roman Civil War, or something from Irish myth? Is there a similar tone to a lot of these paintings? Because I think it's important to have an understanding in terms of what we're being shown and why. What I find so interesting about the Battle of Ventry is the fact that it is an event that seems to be something that people are not encouraged to discuss. Now, maybe you could say that's just because of a series of events, that's because of the usual difficulty in national and ethnic relations, and so on and so forth. Yes, perhaps. But nobody has any sort of feelings about this with Greek myth, and you can make all the terrible or decent movies about Greek myth that you want to until you're blue in the face. RB. Still more believable than the U.S. Civil War. Oh, how fitting, RB. I'm actually going back and doing a little exploration on the Civil War coming up this week, so your comment is very well timed. Eric the Red, more info than a photo. Yes, there is a lot of detail in this particular painting, isn't there? And let's just take a look. And I'm going to remove the banner just so we can scan over it and you can look at some of the details. Now, what we understand is that the battle was virtually a loss for both sides. Yes, according to the myth, Ireland was saved from being conquered by the King of the World, Daredon, or however the name was actually pronounced, whoever the King of the World really was. But the Irish warriors that stood against Daredon, the Fianna, were completely destroyed as a fighting force. That's what the myth says. And there was a terrible lamenting. There was also the intervention of the legendary demigod figures known as the Tuatha De Danann, or it's spelled phonetically Tuatha De Danann, but pronounced Tuatha De Danann. And if I'm mispronouncing it, feel free to correct me, okay? I did not grow up in Ireland. I did not grow up speaking Gaelic, and I mean no insults to anybody who did. It's not my native tongue. So feel free to correct me. It's not going to bother me. But yes, you do see a lot of details in these images and in these kind of paintings. There's a strange amalgamation of different eras that you can see. Almost like you have a mix of barbarians or something from a biblical account. You've got some well-armored knights. Who exactly are they supposed to be? And who are these individuals up here toiling on the wall, or what looks to be what's left of this very interesting structure that appears to be destroyed? The number of different influences in this painting are probably what I find most interesting and telling about it, because it's giving us so many different hints about what's actually going on. Kent, Clash of the Titans. What is Titan? Yeah, that's another good point. What is the real meaning of Titan? Is it referring to some old demigod figure? Is it referring to an actual god? Or is it referring to some other sort of human being? And that's a great point. So, And Kathy, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So moving on past this painting, there's several different versions of the Battle of Entry that you can find and you can read. There was even a book, and I'm not remembering the name of it, that was written during the 1980s. Surprise, surprise. That was probably one of the most detailed accounts of it. Now, was there some fantasy? Were there some creative liberties taken with that book? Absolutely. You can certainly find copies that are still available online. And I believe there's even an audio play that was performed about the Battle of Entry. The reason it's so intriguing to me is there are a lot of old world references to it. But like I said, the real question that I had and that we don't know is if this is an event that did really happen and not just simply a matter of folklore, then when exactly did it happen? How did it happen and how long ago was it? Do we even know what era it was? That's kind of how clueless we were. And here you have the summary of it, the original tale. One of the great tales of the Fianna tells of the mythical Battle of Entry, fought out with heroic, bloody ferocity between the invading forces of the King of the World and Fionn McCool, which is also pronounced many different ways, band of elite warriors. And that's really all there is to the myth. And yet, for whatever reason, it's something that never really got adapted or talked about in any sort of mainstream circles. I mean, you'd think something like this would just make a wonderful movie, especially when we're in a time frame where we seem to be struggling with original ideas. But I guarantee you this is something you will never see that'll be made as a movie, a miniseries, or a Netflix series anytime soon. And if it ever was, well, do we really think they'd be true to the actual story? Probably not. But I'm of the mindset that it would never be adopted. Leo with a good comment here. Real battle covered up as a myth. And that's one of the questions that I have about it. Now, you're probably asking, well, what exactly does this have to do with the fate of the world? Well, stay with me. What we're trying to understand here is we seem to have this event that was very powerful that remains with us. It only remains with us, though, as a myth. And so is it really just a myth, or is there something much more to it? Therein lies the question. And Jamie with a good comment there. Fionn McCool is a chain of pubs in Australia. And it's a name that really endures, that's for sure, as is the Fianna. And let's not forget the Fenian raids that historically occurred right after the United States Civil War. Now, it's not really taught in United States history. It's, an event the United States is embarrassed about. So they don't really talk about it. But in Canada, it's still remembered a little bit more because they fended off the Fenian raids. So the story goes. But that's an exploration for another time. It appears all myth are based in facts, says Brian. And I think there's a lot of legitimacy to that statement. There's something that they're all based in. And so with this event, we have a lot of different intriguing artwork. And actually looking at Irish myth, you have all sorts of unique references. Unique references to entirely different beings of people. The Tuatha De Danann, the Fomorians, so many different interesting creatures, and something that seems to be from a completely different era. And I don't know, in full disclosure, when this battle actually occurred. Hey, Matt, thanks for joining us, and welcome as a new member. I don't know when this battle actually occurred or if it occurred, but I'm of the mindset that it wouldn't have been recorded or remembered in folklore if something didn't happen. And there is evidence. You can go to Ventry Beach in Ireland to this day, Western Ireland, and you can even still explore Skellig Michael, which even in the song by Clonid, it's in the lyrics, where the king of the world rested for a while. It sounds almost like it was some kind of incredible assault position for this massive army that was assembled from across the world to invade what was Ireland at the time. But I think it's safe to say that for whatever reason, it's not something that's supposed to be talked about. At least it's not encouraged to be talked about, and it's not encouraged to be remembered. Now, whatever the reasons, we could certainly argue about them, but I'm just referencing the fact that we have this battle and that we have a lot of different perceptions of it. What kind of technology did they have? Was this really just a battle with spears and shields? Was it like some kind of hoplite battle that we think of Greek battles? Or was it something a lot more advanced? Well, if you read the original poems and if you listen to some of the oral traditions that tell this battle, it kind of gives you the perception of many different concepts, that there was magic, weapons, high technology, weapons such as the disc armor that Ryger used in the old NES game. Yes, I'm actually going there. So here's the question. For all of you who have been with the channel for a while, and whether you haven't, and this is your first introduction to this, that's fine. Recall that we are in the contemporary era, the 5th era. The 4th era was the civilization that preceded ours that we respectfully refer to as Tartaria, but that's probably not what they originally called it. And by the way, that does actually follow the historical precedent that we have, where we have old empires that we don't even call by their name. For example, the Byzantine Empire. That's not what they tell us that the indigenous people called it, or the citizens of that empire called it, much like the Carolingian Empire, which was that Frankish Empire in what is today Germany and France. They didn't call it that either. So we assign modern names to old empires, so I figure let's just do it to civilizations, because we don't know what they called it. But what I want to ask you is, do you think that this battle of entry occurred sometime in the early 4th era? Or do you think it was so fantastic that it occurred in the 3rd era? And what are your thoughts? And no wrong answers, by all means. Just go ahead and volunteer whatever you got. Hey, Clara, good to see you. Thanks for joining us. So, that's a good point. What does your body's water memory tell or hint to you? Going off of more of an intuitive memory concept, or what they used to incorrectly refer to as collective conscience. Is there a collective conscience, or are we plugged into something else? I really don't know. Robert's going with the 3rd era. And you know what? I'll just tell you where my position is on this. I'd originally thought it was 3rd era. Then I refined it and thought it was a battle in the early 4th era. But now I think I'm more of the mindset that it is in the 3rd era. Just because everything is so fantastic with it, and some of the accounts that we have of it barely being memory, there's really no way that it could be something that happened in the 4th era. And so even that becomes very, very difficult to understand something, whether it's myth or whether it really happened. And that's kind of the struggle that we deal with when we do these explorations. So, oh, there you go. Exactly what I feel is the best outcome. But if this is some epic struggle that occurred in the past, then why is it that we're not encouraged to talk about it? If it's just some folklore or mythical event that didn't really happen. And that seems to be what we have with a lot of the Irish myth that makes it so interesting. But whether the Fomorians, the king of the world, actually existed, is it referring to some event with the collapse of civilization? Is it something that's a cyclical event, or did the world actually have an ending at some point in time? That's just what we don't know. Here we go, Kathy. Yeah, that's a good one. What if all history is a myth? Well, maybe it is to some extent. And maybe that's the whole point. We actually have myth from actual events that are clouded, confused, or my favorite word, obfuscated intentionally. So we just don't know what's real and what's not. It's just like looking at an old picture. I got some doozies for you. There's some real interesting artwork, though, that's affiliated with this battle of entry, and you can search it to your heart's content. There's all sorts of different interpretations of what was being written and expressed in this poem and in these oral tales. And that's what I think it's always very intriguing to me. RB here, what if the memories and data load when we wake up in the morning? That's entirely possible, too. Is it a reset every single day when you wake up? I'm certainly not close to that possibility, RB, and that's a great suggestion right there. So, and who knows? Is it part of something else? Is it part of some religious cycle that we're in? Was there a time of the millennium, and then are we just in a short period of time? Don't really know. All things are on the table. Jamie, why is there such a concerted effort to destroy Ireland's history? That is very intriguing, too. And that's something that really hasn't gone away. And now you can't even say that's due to foreign influences. And don't take my word for it. Actually go to Ireland and talk to some of the people who live there and see what they tell you about what's happening. what are their thoughts on their own history and how their own independent government is addressing their history. Talk to them, see what they tell you. I can tell you I've talked to professors, and I did correspond with academics in Ireland back in the day. And yes, their perceptions at that time, this is probably about 20 years ago, is they weren't exactly pleased with the way the preservation of Irish history was going. Of course, you could say that for anybody anywhere. No one's really pleased with how the preservation of their history is going. And yet we've got people in the comments who are telling us history is so very important. Yes, the original conflicting account in the present. And Robert sums it up very nicely. A lot of people aren't very happy about it, and that's probably one of the best examples. And so it's just something that I wanted to call attention to because I think it is important to remember and understand. We have this whole concept of the Vikings, but how historically accurate is that? And you may recall a more contemporary show that I actually refer to, The Lost Kingdom with Uhtred, and the fact that he was actually deleted from history and his correspondence and alliance/contentious relationship with Alfred the Great, the King of the Saxons' last kingdom. Was a very well-written book. Was it history? Was it myth? Was it something in between? I don't know. How in the heck do we know what Vikings actually look like? And seriously, go back and watch one of those miniseries from the 1970s and see how they showed Vikings in the 1970s. And then go and watch movies in intervening decades. And then, of course, last decade when it seemed like, yes, we know what Vikings looked like. They shaved their heads. Oh, really? How exactly do we know that they shaved their heads? What did they actually look like? Who ever saw a Viking? Well, it's written. It's well documented. By who? How many translations? How did it go through different civilizations? If the Vikings were hated, then why were they remembered at all? All those kinds of questions. Maybe you think we have an accurate picture of them, but maybe we don't. Michael Blythe there. Yes. Well, you could really say that about any entertainment. And look, there's a catch-all. They're not saying it's for historical purposes, Michael. It's for entertainment purposes. I know what you're going to say. It's okay. So anyway, that's the whole concept, though, just looking at this one battle, this one event that officially is mythical, it's folklore, and yet there's a lot of detail to it. It's very well remembered. It also inspires a lot of creative integrity. And I'll tell you what, I'm going to try to find the actual name of that novel from the 1980s because I remember reading that probably about a year after it was published and just being completely taken by what an incredible story it was, how much depth there was in the characters. And I remember thinking at the time, this would make a great miniseries. It would make a great movie, but maybe somebody just thought that wasn't the case. And so there goes the Battle of Ventry. And maybe it's not that entertaining to people. Maybe there's something about it that, well, it's a terrifying battle and it's not something that we should celebrate. Now, in the meantime, we're going to talk about all these epic struggles that occurred in Greek myth because that's okay. Who wants to watch Wrath of the Titans? I sure don't, but that's just my opinion. Maybe you think it's a great movie. And maybe you think the Clash of the Titans remake was a great movie. It's junk, leave it behind. Hey, I was just quoting the movie, okay? I wasn't talking about the movie. But anyway, that's all we have for the Battle of Ventry. And I just want to use that as an example of an event that officially it's myth, but it may have happened. It may have been something in the past that we actually have an anchor to that we can remember. And it's important to understand that because I think there are a lot of clues in that. And as the comment earlier that I really agree with, I think there is something a lot more to myth and folklore. And it's why we need to pay more attention to it. Oh, Robert, if only. Maybe one day I'll tell you that story of how that got shot down. Kidding. Maybe that's another idea, right? Anyways, so moving on, we want to look at cycles, but new events. So what we're going to look at here is the fate of the world. And I've got some different outcomes, how things really are. Cycles, but new events. In other words, we're in a cycle, but new events can happen in each cycle. We're not stuck in a loop. We're going to explore that, but how exactly do you know that we're in some kind of time cycle? And who has some of the most famous time cycles? Well, I decided to revisit the Civil War, especially since we've got Veterans Day coming up here in the United States very soon, and it was very fitting. And why am I revisiting the Civil War? Because it's really darned interesting. The Civil War was always really darned interesting for a variety of reasons, not the least of which is I can remember how the American perception of the Civil War changed a lot. The United States goes back and forth on how it views the Civil War. There you go, RB. I wish something would happen. I was promised aliens. I got boredom. Well, there's always next year, RB. So anyways. what's intriguing about the United States Civil War, and I'll just tell you from my perspective, when I was growing up, there was a very unique perspective about the United States Civil War. And you can actually go back and watch films and TV shows from the 1970s. I'll name two. There's The Outlaw Josie Wales with Clint Eastwood. How exactly was the Southern side or the Confederate side depicted in that movie? Well, you could argue it was depicted more, dare I say, sympathetically. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that's what official history says. I'm just talking about a movie that was made in the 1970s that was a little more sympathetic to it. And then, of course, our other favorite film, or excuse me, our other favorite TV show that I like to refer to, Little House on the Prairie, where we actually had Jesse James, who made an appearance on Little House on the Prairie, and he was depicted very sympathetically. Now, of course, it was before he met his demise in Northfield in Minnesota, of all places, but very, very intriguing. Texas redneck hippie. Merrimack, or what is in his hand. So this is Swedish inventor John Ericsson. And that's not the Merrimack, that's the Monitor that he has. That was the ship that he designed and built from the ground up. It was not built on an existing ship. The Merrimack was the existing ship the Confederates captured when they captured Norfolk. How exactly they captured those federal facilities, who knows? Can you imagine somebody capturing federal facilities today? That would never happen in a million years. But apparently it was possible. You know, it was the early 1860s. A civil war was brewing, and because James Buchanan didn't take any steps to prepare the United States for civil war, he was considered a bad president. But then they got Abraham Lincoln in there, and he was ready to go. But anyway, the Confederates captured the Merrimack. They repurposed it, turned it into an ironclad, came up with the revolutionary idea of building an iron ship. And so the Union, in 90 days, hired this Swedish inventor, John Ericsson, and just out of his fourth point of contact, he contrived this incredible ship, the Monitor. Now, I'm showing this because this is one of his monuments that's rather interesting, you know, and you can see that it's very clearly a statue that we'd build. What's this interesting symbol that he's got over here on his jacket? Not exactly sure. But what's the historiosity of John Ericsson? Well, he's a historical figure, and official history will tell you that, yes, he existed, and yes, he invented the Monitor with the revolving turret, a feature that's still used on naval ships to this day, and also used on the Venerable tank. John Ericsson had many other inventions under his belt, though. Steam engines, and of course, the USS Princeton. Yet when you look at these actual monuments that are dedicated to John Ericsson, what exactly do these symbols or these individuals have to do with John Ericsson? And that's what I'm asking and wondering, because this is something that we see all the time. Mother Shipton's prophecy. Ah, yes, Jamie. Ah, yes. Well, that's always a good question. Who does really control America? The people do. That's the official answer. It's a republic with representatives. And people are very happy with those representatives in America right now because they're supposed to be happy with the representatives, right? So anyway, but let me remove the banner here, because what you really have is this is his monument, but there's nothing here that has anything to do with him. I mean, this almost looks like it's a monument to the Battle of Entry, I would say. I mean, I could make that argument. It would make more sense. I mean, what was John Ericsson in his bodybuilding phase before he invented the Monitor, and this was supposed to be dedicated to him? I know it's supposed to be some sort of strange artistic license that's being taken. It's representative. It's an analogy. It's allegory. Of course, it always is. And here you can see, yes, the other part of this monument. And they do actually have old John sitting down here, and here's his name. But it's really, really odd how it looks like there's different parts of this monument. Now, maybe I'm just seeing things. Maybe you want to disagree with me, and that's completely okay. Maybe it is all John Ericsson's monument. And we always liked doing these, how shall we say, very scantily clad figures that aren't really wearing a lot of clothing on all these Civil War monuments. Yes, of course, I'm referring to the Iowa Soldiers and Sailors Monument, where we have the, rather naked lady who represents Iowa. And keep in mind, these statues and these monuments were built during a time when there officially wasn't a lot of public tolerance. So I guess it's different if you make a statue. Maybe so. I guess we'll see what happens to this live stream. You know, I'm being facetious, but I'm also being a little serious. Ah, Jackie right there. Repurposed statues. Yes, quite possible. Repurposed and altered statues. And there is a lot of symbolism in all of them. Although what symbolism actually applies? It's like, I didn't know the griffin was a national symbol of the United States. No one will tell you that today, or was it a symbol of Iowa? Was it a symbol of John Ericsson? Who knows? RB, was it not cold back then? Yeah, I thought so. I mean, why else would they wear all those wool uniforms and so much more in different battles? So anyway, that's what we have with John Erickson. And then here's another view of the very interesting monument. I mean, you would think, and look, I'm not an artist. You know, I did a little poetry back in the day, but I'm not an artist. But wouldn't you think that they would put John Erickson actually standing on the statue and not sitting below it? Or, I mean, it's really strange. It just doesn't make a lot of sense to me with the positioning. And even the wording on it just seems to be a little off. So I'm not really sure. It's just one of many examples. But then there's also the fact, going back to the United States Civil War, that we had the very first submarines, the USS Alligator, which was one of the first operational submarines. Now, of course, people remember the CSS Hunley, which was a Confederate ship that attempted an attack on a U.S. or a United States Navy ship. I think it was the Houstonianic. And then we all also remember the legendary Turtle from the Revolutionary War. And yeah, I think that's a little bit legendary. And Brian here with a great comment, Jules Verne, yes. So during the United States Civil War, it's well documented that they innovated ships with turrets. They had steam-driven ships before the Civil War, but this was the first wartime application. And there was even a submarine. Submarines used in combat, no less. That's what the official history says. So it's just another one of those interesting things. Did they actually have all those technological innovations? Or are we seeing accounts of technology that was located and salvaged? I mean, ultimately, that's going to be your point to make and your decision to make. But we have all these photos of these cities that are just utterly destroyed. And we've explored these cities in our explorations in the past, and especially in the United States, Chicago, Boston. You know, it wasn't just the cities in the South that got destroyed, Atlanta, Charleston, but there's no shortage of it, where we see this kind of utter and total destruction. Destruction that we would expect to see with World War II, with the carpet bombing that occurred, the very necessary strategic carpet bombing that occurred. At least we were assured it was very necessary, but you know, you're trying to win a war. But yet we could see this kind of destruction from fires, from cannonballs in the Civil War, from the Great City Fires. Now, going back to that old concept of the 5 Ws, were these really separate events, or were these the same event? Or had somebody founded or salvaged some technology and they were testing it out? Maybe they didn't have any idea what it would actually do. Maybe it only worked one time. How do we exactly know? Jamie Griffin here. Verne supposedly met Nemo when he was a lad. It's very, very interesting, too, how Captain Nemo is a bit of an analogy character, if you will. There's also, if you've ever watched Master of the World with Vincent Price from the 1960s, that's kind of a Nemo character. And then, of course, there's our favorite character from Discordia, who wears a Freddy Krueger sweater. No, I'm not kidding. I mean, the guy actually wore a sweater just like Freddy Krueger long before Robert Englund ever played Freddy Krueger. I wish I were making it up, but I'm not. It's just one of those things that's really, really crazy. But we have all this going on with this event. Is this a cycle? Is it a reset cycle? And then we have a new era. Maybe things can get better, but a lot of times they just tend to degenerate for a variety of reasons. We can't build like we used to. We can't maintain the infrastructure like we used to. All we can do is salvage and recover what came before and try to press it back in service and use it as long as we can. And is it possible that as the eras have gone on, we've simply degenerated? Our ability to build and maintain has declined over time. And that's really, is that the fate of the world? Are we just going to continue this decline? So yes, we have cycles. There's going to be another reset. You know, whether you think of a reset as a day-to-day event or you think of it as something else, it's another one of those hard decisions that you have to make. Now, I'm not someone who's preaching doom and gloom, but if we go off of what's come in the past, there's a lot of evidence that yes, things have continued to diminish. You know, have our life forces continued to diminish? That's arguable. Have our actual lifespans continued to diminish? Well, if you go off the Bible and take it literally, or any other number of religious texts, they say that human beings used to live much longer. Not a paltry 70 to 100 years, but hundreds of years, some even over 1,000. Is that just a myth? Oh, yeah, it's just a myth. Although if you actually try to do the math, looking at a lot of those original texts, it only works if you accept the fact that what they say for the age of those people was true. How old did Noah live to be? Was Noah a historical figure, or was that just a name assigned to some other figure? So, Battlestar Utarian. It sure feels like a day to day these days. Yeah, I'm with you. It does feel like there's a lot of different little events that occur. Charless, no more resets, judgment, entirely possible. We just don't know. Is it a cycle? But we have new events that are happening. So this is just one of the theories. And again, this is all theoretical. You decide what you're going to believe. But it is interesting to see that we have all this remaining architecture, and you go to a place like Chicago and you'll see it in different places. You'll see this kind of destruction. I mean, without even telling you the name of the city, could this be any city in World War II that was subjected to devastating destruction? I mean, we just explored Volgograd this last week, formerly known as Stalingrad. That was a city that was bombed. It was also a city that had the largest land battle officially in the history of warfare that occurred in it. And so very, very destructive. Or is this Chicago? Or is this something else? Could it be any of these cities that's just completely leveled? And so if this is all you have, then what are you left with doing? Cody, yeah, that was called the Alamo. Yeah, maybe the Alamo is something along those lines too. Get down to San Antonio at some point in time. I need to get back to Texas. Thanks for reminding me. But you also have other images like this. I mean, is this a photograph? Is this a drawing? Is this a combination photograph and drawing? Because when you look closely at this, I'm not really sure. Now, the official explanation will be this was taken from a print in a book, and so maybe that's why these individuals look like drawn figures. I don't know. What exactly is going on in this image? It seems like there's a lot of panic. Is there a fire going on, or is there something else? Is there a fire sale going on? I'm not really sure because, I mean, why would you bring your horse and cart up there unless you're trying to get something out of there? It looks like the flood of the ages is coming and someone's really concerned, or maybe there is some sort of fire that's rapidly approaching this structure. But what really to make of this image? And here's the thing, without assigning context, in other words, a meaning or the 5 W's, it becomes a lot more interesting. Because if you don't know what happened with this image and you're just seeing it for the first time, would it not be possible that anybody, I'm not saying I would ever do this, but anybody could come up with a 5W explanation? So who is this? These are Americans. What is this? They are abandoning the city because they were told a massive fire was coming. When did this happen? 1871. Now, what if somebody else said, these aren't Americans, these are British, and this is a facility in Liverpool, and they're abandoning this facility in 1892 because they were told that there was going to be a big riot and civil disobedience was going to occur, or something along those lines. The point I'm getting at is anybody can really say anything, and if you don't know the context, if you didn't actually witness the event, then an image can become associated with anything, can it not? Oh, there's a good one from Cody. Yeah, I mean, maybe so. And that's just it, Corky. Is it a photo? I mean, it's taken from a book. What do we know? Who actually has the original negatives? And how much can we trust the original negatives? All interesting questions. How much of Chicago actually went up in quote unquote smoke in that fire? And what was that great fire really about? Why do we have great fires up in Peshtigo in Wisconsin, essentially on the same line of longitude? You're just at a different latitude. You went north a little bit. Peshtigo, around where Green Bay is. That's why the Packers have always been the independent football team, right? Sorry to throw in one football joke. But this is supposedly an image that shows you the fire destruction that occurred in Chicago, the Great Fire. And, it doesn't look like it was that much of the city. Sure, the downtown, look how well laid out Chicago already was in 1871. Very, very impressive. Lots of build out in just a very short amount of time. I'll tell you what, those people in the 1800s, they could accomplish anything, especially people who came to America. I mean, why isn't Europe Ecumenopolis? Why isn't Europe completely covered with a city if they could build things this fast? And not to mention, if the population would grow this fast. Remember, the official population of the United States increased by over 1,000%. Actually, it was a lot more than that from 1800 to 1900. In some cities, we've got tens of thousands of percentage of population growth. No, it doesn't make sense. You can't really justify it. But what actually happened in Chicago? Well, look, this isn't actually a photo. This is just a painting. So dramatic license. Yes, it looks like most of the city's going up in smoke. And of course, we're well aware of the tales that we have of the cow kicking over the lamp or whatever we had. And then we've even got some other accounts that say meteors. If you ride that, oh, there's a good one from Jamie. Yeah, the 451 Fireman, Fahrenheit 451. Great book. I strongly suggest reading it if you haven't. So, yeah, Robert with a good call out there. Yeah, the city grids never really made a lot of sense. Washington is one that keeps me up at night still to this day. So, anyway, but what actually happened? Were these all events that occurred at the same time? What exactly is this over here? Oh, very interesting. I guess it's a circular field near Chicago. It's not a missile silo, obviously. Oh, look at that. Oh no, the roundhouse is going up in smoke, or maybe it's going to survive. Yeah, we clearly have the roundhouse right there, right next to the river. I guess it makes perfect sense. Where's Jackson Park? I'm not really sure. But it's just another one of those paintings that causes you to question things. And there's all sorts of dramatic paintings of Chicago and many of the other cities and what actually happened. Were they different events that happened at different times, or were they showing the exact same event? And whether we're in Boston. Yeah, I'll admit, I watched that movie The Departed recently, so it's still on my mind. But what are you going to do about it? Oh, there you go, Cody. Someone smoked a cigarette wrong. My favorite is, I think it was Tomlinson Hall in Indianapolis, where we had the pigeon that dropped the cigarette butt, and that's what sent Tomlinson Hall up in smoke. Yeah, a pigeon dropping a cigarette butt. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it? Yeah, Daryl, Poor White City. I remember when they were going to do a television adaptation of Devil in the White City, but for some reason that didn't come to fruition. I can't imagine why. Thanks for making that comment. Yeah, I forgot about that. Anyways. But, you know, it's not just there. What about London? Well, the fire in London occurred in 1666, right? Did it? Maybe. And how much of London went up in smoke? And of course, we can trace the development of St. Paul. Hey, check out the bridge. Wow, castles on the bridge, lots of arches. How the heck did they get that up in 1666? I know it was in Europe. They had a lot of time. There were a lot of artisans and craftsmen. But, you know, if they could build a whole nation where no nation existed and numerous cities and populate it, then again, I'm asking, why the heck wasn't all of Europe covered in a continuous city? I mean, shouldn't have been, and covered in people. I know there was the bubonic plague. That's how we explain it. How did this fire start in London in 1666? I know, I watched that episode of Doctor Who, The Visitation. It was the pteroleptals. Yes. But on an honest note, though, are these separate events? I mean, what the heck? Oh, never mind. But it's still laid out like a bird's eye view map. And so all these different fires showing all this city destruction. Now, does anybody know what kind of cloud this is? There's a very definitive name for this kind of cloud. And I'm always about highlighting this because this sort of cloud is, well, let's just say it's made an appearance a couple times over the past couple years. Yeah, metaphorical. I do wonder about it, though. But has anybody seen this kind of cloud? Because it oftentimes gets mistaken for another kind of cloud. I'm not going to say which kind of cloud because, you know, it's not something I should probably be saying. I mean, you're smart people. You've seen it before. But does anybody know what the official name for this cloud is? Hey, Jackie. Welcome and thanks for joining in. Oh, it's definitely a fire, but there's a funky name for it. No, you're close. You're close. Technically, this is called a pyrocumulus cloud. And there's a big how to do. Here's a better image of the pyrocumulus cloud. There's a big how to do about how after, let me be very, very clear on this, and I'm not going to show the image. You can look it up on your own. But how after the atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima, the city was on fire and it produced a pyrocumulus cloud. And there's a photo of it taken from the air, of course. And that photo is not to be mistaken for the mushroom cloud of the atomic weapon that was used on it. So yes, there's obviously a little bit of confusion. I can't imagine why. But you see these pyrocumulus clouds when you have large fires that burn out of control. And yet they strangely look similar to another type of cloud. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, but it's another one of those fascinating things. Now just think, we do have these historical accounts of all these city fires. Now, granted, the historical account says that all the city fires occurred at different times. The Chicago fire didn't happen the same time as the Boston fire. It did happen the same time as the Peshtigo fire, but that was up in Wisconsin. You know, it wasn't a city fire. So different event, same event, I don't know. But interesting to think, if you had all of these cities on fire at the same time, and vast portions of the land, then what kind of massive pyrocumulus clouds would you have had all over the land at the time? Was that reflecting something else? And that's what I've always really wondered about that. Is there a reason why these images have such a profound psychological effect on us? Why, when we see a quote unquote pyrocumulus cloud, it kind of taps that little bit of the fear response in the back of the mind? I'm not really sure. And yeah, here you can see exactly how a pyrocumulus cloud is formed. Smoke carried up into the stratosphere, hot air condenses and clouds form, superheated updrafts by vast portions of the land, the city, whatever, being on fire. Yes, very well documented science right here. Kitsch, cumulus. And there's all kinds of interesting cloud effects, aren't there? Yeah, Michael says that very well. A primal fear. And it does really affect people. And if you want to see how fear can affect people, just go back and look at the fallout, you'll excuse the pun, to the British nuclear war the British nuclear war documentary film called Threads. And it's actually called Threads Fallout. You can watch it on YouTube. And pay attention to what the old Vice Air Marshal says. It's very, very interesting. I've alluded to it a couple times. It's obviously okay to talk about because it was a full documentary. So I can't imagine anybody being in trouble for it. But it's really interesting seeing how people were affected by the fear of what was shown in that movie. And then here's just another little bit of a diagram. These diagrams are very, very helpful, aren't they? Now, going back to something a little bit more down to earth. All over, we have the remnants of these incredible municipal buildings, these county courthouses. And this is one, of course, from the state that I do a lot of explorations in, because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me why they have so many incredible structures like this. And of course, it's in the state of Iowa. And why does Iowa interest me so much? Because there's actually a lot of hidden gems in Iowa. And we'll get to which county courthouse this is. This is the Davis County Courthouse in Bloomfield, Iowa, a very modest-sized town. And so at any point in its history, let's just go to today. It's 2025, and the town of Bloomfield, Iowa, in Davis County wants to build a new courthouse. Do you think anybody, anywhere in Iowa, could build a courthouse like this today? I always ask this question, and it's a very serious question. Because, yes, of course, this courthouse is dated to the distant past. We'll get to it in a second. But I'm just asking you, without any sort of preconceived notions, do you think anybody could build this courthouse today? Hey, Corky can build it. Awesome, Corky. Get us the plans and get it up. I want to have a courthouse in my backyard. Definitely, it's written they were. There you go, Eric. You're on top of it. You're absolutely right. It wouldn't be written down if it wasn't true, right? Anybody remember that? Yeah, billion? Yeah, that's about right. I don't think you can do it with a trillion. I was going to make a really bad joke there, but I'm going to hold my tongue. Kathy, no way. Michael says, yes, if you wrote it down, right? Maybe you think it can be done. Maybe you believe somewhere, some way, somebody could do it. But I will tell you, you're not going to see it anytime soon. Anyways. Oh, yeah, and of course, there's images of scaffolding around it because you know how it goes with these old world buildings. I mean, these old courthouses, they're just rickety buildings that they constantly have to do repair work to keep them afloat or keep them up. So the official account says. Now, let's look at our historical marker here. Or actually, before we do, I want to consider something else. So looking at the state of Iowa, does anybody know where the original capital, the state capital in Iowa was? And by the way, it wasn't a state capital, it was a territorial capital. You might be surprised. Yeah, well, you know, there's always renovations going on, Michael. So, yeah, renovation equals destruction. Or it even, I could dare say, it equals concealment too, Jamie. But yeah, absolutely. We're not able to really see it. Anyway, a little peculiarity about Iowa. The very first capital was a territorial capital in the town of Burlington, way down here. And by the way, Burlington was also the territorial capital of Wisconsin. How the heck does that make any sense? Don't ask me. The next state capital, once it was a state, was in Iowa City. And that was in the 1840s. And then by the late 1860s, they moved it to the west in Des Moines. So keep that in mind, about 30 years, 3 different capitals. And of course, we remember that story. I mean, the historical account that, you know, I'm not saying it's a story, but, you know, it tells us a good story of how they built the state capital in Iowa. because they had refunds from the Civil War. How the hell they got refunds from the federal government, I don't know. Remember, there was no income tax. Yes, there was income tax during the Civil War, but then it was only for the more wealthy of citizens. So, the entire population wasn't paying an income tax. It certainly wasn't World War II yet, as we looked at in the Reset Barons. But look at that. 3 different state capitals, territorial capital in Burlington, one in Iowa City, and then over in Des Moines in a short 30-year period, 3 decades. How incredible. What amazing development. Now, how many times has the United States Capitol moved? And where has it moved? Well, originally it was in Philadelphia, and then there were a couple temporary locations, and then officially it was in Washington, D.C., which is where it's been for the most amount of time. Now, I recall, and I'm going to date myself here, and that's okay. During the Cold War, there was a lot of concern, we're going off official history here, the official account, that the Soviet Union, with their nuclear submarines, boomers as they called them, could launch intercontinental ballistic missiles, or they could launch submersible launch ballistic missiles, SLBMs, what we call the Polaris from the U.S. boomers, that they could strike Washington, D.C., and they'd only have about 6 minutes from launch to detonation, maybe even less. And so the discussion was, well, why don't we move the national capital inland where there'd be a little bit more time? Maybe, I don't know, somewhere like Nebraska, Kansas. Could you imagine moving the national capital there, like Omaha? Coincidentally, the Strategic Air Command base Offutt is near Omaha, but they never moved the national capital. All I'm getting at here is that the state of Iowa moved its state capital 3 times in 30 years. How many times has the United States moved its national capital in going on 250 years? It's just a consideration. That's all I'm saying. I mean, why didn't they move the capital? For that fact, why didn't they build another capital city out of Hyde? Oh, no. We built Washington out of nothing. We did it when the nation was new, when we didn't really have a lot of money, officially. And by the way, this was the 1800s. And even though we were under a capitalist economy then, officially, we didn't have the ability to, how shall we say, go into great debt to achieve these projects. That wasn't an innovation until the 1900s, again, according to official history. It's just one of those things I found very, very fascinating. Well, I mean, why would you want to move the capital from Washington, D.C.? It's very, very beautiful. The National Mall is there. Who in their right mind would want to move it? It's tradition. I mean, you can justify the movement of the state capital of Iowa because, well, it was a new state. No one has really settled on it being anywhere. Anyway, going back to the War of 1812, another one of those interesting conflicts, recall that Washington, D.C. was burned by the British. Keep in mind that many Americans felt that the United States won that war. It was a perception. It was technically a draw because of the Great Battle of New Orleans that Andrew Jackson won against the British, a battle that occurred after the Treaty of Ghent was signed, so called to the official history. But a very, very interesting conflict, one in which there was a lot of, how shall we say, incompetence, especially on the side of the United States military. Even though, according to official history, the United States had already participated in the Northwest Indian War, occurred 1791 to 1794, and had learned that they needed a regular army. Then I guess they forgot that lesson because then they didn't have a regular army to invade Canada. And that's why they never really successfully invaded Canada. They were repulsed numerous times. There was a raid that burned York, and that's where they killed Tecumseh. But that was what the raid on Washington, D.C. was in response to, apparently. Really strange conflict, the War of 1812. Yeah, the United States didn't exactly come out so well in that. Remember, the White House was burned. So, they had to repaint it, and that's why it's the White House. Sure. But just another one of those strange little conflicts. And keep in mind that while that was going on, the Napoleonic Wars were going on too. Very, very interesting. And why wouldn't the capital of the United States have been moved? Here you're seeing in this little diagram, the original United States and then the Louisiana Purchase to start the 1800s. So you would think that the national capital would have been moved further to the west. I don't know, maybe someplace like what is today Frankfort, Kentucky. I'm just throwing names out there and geographical locations. But they always left the capital on the East Coast. There was never any desire to move it to the west. Not in the 1800s, not in the 1900s, not during that scary, frightening time of the Cold War. Whether it was bombers coming from another continent or intercontinental ballistic missiles coming from another continent, or the ones coming from below the ocean. It's just very interesting to me. Now, going back to that Davis County courthouse we looked at, yes, of course, they have one of these little plaques that say, built in 1877 at a cost of $45,000. Yes. And then they talk about who was involved, the architect. Why do these architects always have initials? E. Townsend Mix. T.J. Tolan. T.J. Tolan. I don't know. Sounds like a cop, like T.J. Hooker. T.J. Tolan. Okay, I'll stop right there. But yep, historical place, what they could build in Davis County in Iowa in 1877. Yeah, could you do it today? Well, of course we can't do it today. We don't have the artisan and craftsman. And there you have it. So, I.M. Kairos. Wasn't there an amazing earthquake in 1812? Yeah, it was about that time frame, and good to see you, I.M. Kairos. It came a couple years later, and the New Madrid fault line was active, and they say that the Mississippi River ran backwards. I recall exploring that in the great 1800s events. So, anyway, trying to reconcile all this interesting history that we have, but going back to the concept of cycles and new events. And that's what we seem to have here. Now, I just thought I'd showcase this. This is a incredible house in the lovely city of Los Angeles that's available for sale for $17.75 million. Now, granted, this picture is a couple years old. It's probably north of 20 mil now. What a lovely, great house and a great example of fifth era architecture. And I just thought it'd be interesting to showcase this. Now, I used to compare this to the courthouse, because this is what we do now in the 21st century. But I actually thought I'd pull another house from Iowa. And, this is a very, very intriguing house in Benton County, Iowa, of all places. And it's called the W.C. Ellis House. And it's in the small town of Vinton, Iowa, a town today of only a couple thousand people. Although, strangely enough, it started off with 2,000 people. It's in between Cedar Rapids and Waterloo. And this was built in 1893 for a gentleman named W.C. Ellis, who officially was the vice president of Farmers National Bank of Vinton, and he was the president of the Vinton Savings Bank. And he was also the vice president of the Iowa Canning Company. Funny, he was not actually an owner. It just says he was the vice president, but somehow he had all this money. So I guess if you're a banker and a vice president, you have a lot of money. But anyway, it was the largest corn canning establishment in the world, because apparently a lot of people needed to be fed in the 1890s. No different than today. And so he had all this money. And because he had all this money, he decided to build this incredible structure in the very small town of Vinton, Iowa. And thank you very, very much for that, New West Reset. And it's great to see you. And by the way, I've got a little commemoration and call out for both you and Old World Exploration coming this week, because I'm finally hitting Canada for some exploration. So look out for that. But yes, these very, very interesting houses. And this is considered a mansion in the very small town of Vinton, Iowa. Yeah, I suppose. Why not? Oh, yeah, it wouldn't be a mansion unless I showed you the interior, right? And here it is, still laid out. Oh, I like how they have exit above the doors there. But yes, this is what you could build in Iowa in 1892. And, compare and contrast that with what costs you $17 million. I'll just go on the low side in Los Angeles today. Yes, I know. Los Angeles, Iowa, there's no comparison, right? Everybody wants to live in Los Angeles. There's no issues there. There's no concerns about living in California. Who in the heck would want to live in Iowa? Well, on that note, why would somebody with all that money in the 1800s want to live in the small town of Vinton and actually want to build a house like this? Now, I'm not even going to ask you the question if we think anybody can build a house like this today. But let me ask you, which one would you want to live in? And again, it's a rhetorical question. But that all comes back to the whole concept of cycles. Was this really something that was just built for a very well-off person? Or was this the kind of house that many more people in the population had? Who knows for sure? It's very, very suspicious to me, and Jamie says it very nicely. It's suspicious to me that these incredible houses are located in small towns, because the official history really doesn't support that. It would make a heck of a lot more sense if Mr. Ellis decided to build his house in even Cedar Rapids or Waterloo at that time. By the way, there's a very interesting history with Waterloo in Iowa with the Maybach manufacturing plant. The car that, strangely enough, looked a lot like a Model T, but that company went out of business. Then Ford went into business and produced the Model T, even though the, dare I say, variant earlier version of the Model T was actually a car that was made in Iowa in the early 1900s. It's that same model that you see driving up the steps of the Iowa State Capitol. Anyways, so moving on past cycles and new events, let's talk about the end of the world. Is there actually going to be an end of the world that's going to come? Should we consider it? Should we be worried about it? Well, let's talk about it. And as always, I've got a little bit of a film reference that I'm going to show, and I hope you don't mind. And it's probably one of the films where I first thought about the end of the world, and it's even stated in the film that it's the end of the world. And that's Beneath the Planet of the Apes, the sequel to the original Planet of the Apes. A very, very interesting film that showed a lot of different reset concepts in it. And here we got James Franciscus with the mutants, the survivor of the post-atomic horror, or whatever they called it then. Very, very interesting sets. And you should look up the history of the screenwriter who wrote Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Now, officially, Beneath the Planet of the Apes was the idea of the original film star Charlton Heston. He did not want to star in infinite sequels, and so he only agreed to appear in the ending of the film. So they got actor James Franciscus to kind of be I don't want to say a Charlton Heston stand-in, because that's kind of insulting to James Franciscus, but the way they treated his character in this film, he was kind of a stand-in for Colonel George Taylor, Charlton Heston's character. It really doesn't help that there's a one-on-one fight between the two of them, and Charlton Heston really got the better of him, at least in my opinion. But anyway, that was the whole point behind the film. Now, what's really, really interesting in the Planet of the Apes films is it's an analogy. It's an allegory for how humans developed. When you watch the film, you think, apes don't kill apes. That's what they say. But as the films go on, you see that the apes actually develop the same kind of inclinations that bring humans apart. There's division, there's hatred, there's the desire to destroy. And by the fifth and final film, even though the budget had been decreased, Battle of the Planet of the Apes, this theme had played out. But you actually see the start of this theme really come to play in the second film, Beneath the Planet of the Apes. And so it's again giving that whole concept, it's leading right to the end of the world because nobody can break the cycle in time. I love you, Dr. Zaius. Yes, this is the scene right before Colonel Taylor triggers the Alpha Omega bomb and destroys the entire land, the planet, whatever you want to think of it as. Yes, that whole concept of a weapon being so powerful it could destroy the entire land. The Alpha Omega bomb, the actual doomsday weapon. Hey, look at that. Nice organ that it's in front of, and even some old world architecture. I can think of some other former explorers who were a little bit fooled by that and thought, well, that's really the sign that there was no previous advanced civilization because, I just saw some footage in St. Patrick's and it convinced me it didn't really happen. I am not of that mindset, and everybody's entitled to their opinion. I'm just telling you mine. But very, very interesting that in this film, what you see is instead of the apes actually being a better civilization than humanity, they actually fall to the same vices that humanity has. There's social division, they hate one another, and ultimately they hate themselves. And they go on an aggressive war of conquest, invading these mutated human city and what was left of New York City, and ultimately leading to destruction. The end of the world, so to speak. But I always thought it was very well covered in this movie in these very, very powerful ideas. That's a good one, Adam's Bridge. I'm going to be exploring that one too, Charles. Thanks for bringing that up. So, and some people would say Ragnarok is coming soon, and that's what it's a reference to. RB, Metropolis and Planet of the Apes, same universe. That's a very, very interesting concept, RB. I'd never really thought of that, but you make a good point there. There's a lot of consistency between the two of them. Coincidental? Or, maybe from a similar account? I don't know for sure. This is always very intriguing to me. So they had this really weird scene in Beneath the Planet of the Apes where the mutated humans are praying to the bomb because they think of their bomb as a deity. And this is what they say. The heavens declared the glory of the bomb, and the firmament showeth his handiwork. How interesting. Glory of the bomb in the firmament. Glory be to the bomb and to the holy fallout, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. And then, of course, you know what happens when you detonate this thing. Yeah, it ends that cycle, doesn't it? What interesting lines, though. And like I said, if you're really curious about this and the origins of where these ideas came from, do the hard research on the screenwriter of Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Look at that gentleman's background and see what's actually written into these words. I mean, you can read it for yourself. Firmament. Do I really have to spell it out for you? No, I don't think I do. Now, we do end of the world movies now and have in this century. And, I'll just highlight this one, Leave the World Behind. I'm going to admit I didn't particularly enjoy this movie so much. I just want to let you know we still do end of the world movies to this day. And yeah, there were just some things about this movie that disappointed me. I mean, the ideas in the intro were very interesting, but the middle act of it it kind of lost its focus. And then I'm just going to admit the ending really, really disappointed me. And I'll just be honest with all of you. There was a time when I used to love the Rembrandts. I really liked that band, but this movie kind of spoiled it for me. So anyway, so that's another theory. Now let's go to one of my greatest fears. No, not the end of the world, but the infinite recursion time loop. Okay, let's get this off of here. And let's take a look at some of the images from Time Loop. Now, of course, I'm going to reference Star Trek The Next Generation because they've actually got one of the best indications of a time loop. That's relatively simple. Now, does anybody know what specific episode of Star Trek The Next Generation this image is from? Let me make sure I go full image on that one. And if you know the name of the episode right off the bat, you're a better fan than I am because I actually had to look it up. It's been a while. That's a good one. Go to bed, old man. You have no idea, Sonny Kim. You have no idea, really. Well, thanks, Corky. I really appreciate that. So this is from the Star Trek The Next Generation episode Cause and Effect. This is where the Enterprise D gets stuck in a time loop where they come across a temporal anomaly, Rift of the Week, and they encounter this old Federation ship. Now, initially, I thought it was the USS Reliant, but it's not a Miranda class. It's a Soyuz class. Yes, I'm a total Star Trek geek. And what happens is every time the ships collide, the time loop resets and the Enterprise comes back in it, and they have to constantly repeat this series of events. And so eventually they become aware that they're stuck in a time loop. And so they have to send a message back to realize that the courses of action suggested by Commander or Lieutenant Commander Data and Commander Riker, which one's the correct course of action. You don't remember the episode. Data is the one who suggests they use a tractor beam to alter the other ship's trajectory before it hits the Enterprise. The Enterprise loses power. They can't move out of the way. So they've only got two options. Use a tractor beam. Tractor beam doesn't work. It hits the warp nacelle and both ships are destroyed. But Commander Riker suggests that they decompress the shuttle bay and that'll push the Enterprise out of the way. And they figure this out, but they have to figure out a way to communicate to themselves in the time loop, even though they don't have awareness, that it's Commander Riker who's going to make the winning decision. So I guess that just goes to show you Commander Riker might not have been the best tactician, but he was really good at collision avoidance. Yeah, that's a bit of a joke. And of course, it's because Riker has 3 pips. Data suddenly starts putting up the number 3 and has the number 3. I'm not kidding. It is the number 3 in the episode because Commander Riker has 3 pips. So when it comes to starship collision avoidance, go with his suggestion, decompress the shuttle bay. And yes, I'd be remiss if I didn't admit that Kelsey Grammer appears as Captain Morgan Bateson. If only we could have gotten a Star Trek show with Kelsey Grammer headlining it. Can you imagine? Maybe they could have even gotten Christy Alley to come back too. But, that's just my mind going in crazy places. But the whole point about the recursion loop is that the Enterprise was stuck. Time was still passing. Now, there's another movie that handles recursion loop in a very different way, and that's Donnie Darko, an early 2000s movie. Now, I know people think that I give 2000s films a hard time, but there are some really good ones. And I would say Donnie Darko was one of those hidden gems, if you will. Now, a lot of people have seen it. A lot of people haven't. But what's it really getting at? Infinite recursion, a time loop. Now, there's a very simple diagram to explain this film. Now, if you're not familiar with this film, it's about Donnie Darko, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. And he has a dream where he encounters this rabbit, this very scary looking rabbit. It's a Halloween costume, who's named Frank, and tells him to leave his bedroom and sit out under the sky. And he avoids being hit by a random plane engine that falls out of the sky. Now, what this film has to do with is alternating timelines and then a recursion loop. So there is this point in time where Donnie dies, and by Donnie dying, it prevents the end of the world. Now, a lot of people don't understand this, but I'll explain to you exactly how it works in this little diagram. So Donnie lives, and because of that, it leads to the end of the world. Why? Because the wormhole actually destroys the world, because it's an indication that there's some higher power that's actually going to prevent the world not being what it's supposed to be. That's what's in the film. But because of that, the higher power wants to give the character the chance to save the world. So the jet engine gets sent back in time, and Donnie decides that he needs to die. Otherwise, it will not prevent the end of the world. And so because of that, he stays in his room, and the engine falls on him and kills him. Now, of course, there's some legitimate questions. Why doesn't Frank tell him to get back in bed? and not allow the alternate timeline to be created where the world's destroyed. Because Frank represents some sort of dark entity in the movie. And no, the movie doesn't explain anything, and I actually think it works. It explains enough to make it intriguing. Donnie's mom and sister not being on the plane doesn't prevent the plane from not flying that path, right? Why wouldn't the plane hit the wormhole here? Simple. Because the wormhole doesn't exist in the actual timeline. Now, is it possible that we're stuck in some kind of strange and crazy temporal recursion, that we're in a time loop? I'll admit it's one of my greatest fears. What if we're actually living these same series of events? Oh yeah, that's a very good point. Right there. Black Uni Griffin. The director's cut is good. Yes, and I strongly recommend the director's cut. Just like I recommend the director's cut for Lawnmower Man and Kingdom of Heaven and many other films for that fact. So, I am Kairos. A squirrel prevented me from getting in a wreck the other night. Yeah, I see exactly what you mean. Oh, yes, and then there was Groundhog Day. That's another good one. I mean, there were some really good films that really hit it right on the nose, what a recursion loop is and what it's like. In Groundhog Day, that's a single day. Could you imagine? I mean, what poor old Phil went through living that day over and over again. And just imagine if we don't have any awareness of it. That's what was interesting to me about the Star Trek episode. They had a bit of a conscious awareness of it. Things felt familiar, but they didn't know. And I think that's what made it very, very intriguing. Now, yes, there have been some other movies that have looked at time loops. I'm not going to talk about Looper. The less said about that, the better. But, there's many, many other examples where they show this entire principle in practice. Yeah, you know what, Michael? I'll say that Bruce Willis was by far and away the best part of that film. That's just my opinion. That's just my opinion. But anyway, that's the whole concept of being stuck in a recursion loop. And is that what we really see with the old calendars? That are they cyclical or are they circular? Are we trapped in a circle? Is the orbis, so to speak, if you know what I mean, really meaning that we're trapped in a form of a temporal recursion or a time loop? Is that really what it's alluding to? Is that why we see circles so many times? What the heck does it even matter? Yeah, Hollis, I see your comment. You know what happens when I try to mention that in a public live stream. But yes, you are correct. You're absolutely correct. And so it's one of those things that we really have to deal with, because it may be possible that we're stuck in a recursion loop, that we're stuck living the same life over and over and over again. And that's why you have this feeling of deja vu. And you get to do it all over again. RB gets to relive thinking she's going to come across aliens, and then they just don't ever come up. I go back thinking that, one day we're going to be doing space travel, especially when I watched 2010, but then it just doesn't happen. We actually get to 2010 and, officially we're not even to the moon. Yeah. So I know you could just say, well, it's because technology and futurism, it prepared your mind for something that just wasn't possible. Give it a longer timeline, 500, 1,000, 10,000 years. Eventually we'll get there. But the real point being is that things feel familiar and we're not exactly sure why. That these events repeat over and over again. Is that the ultimate fate of the world? Is that what we really are? We're stuck in a time loop. Westworld's another good example. Reprogramming every single day. The film and then the first season of the TV series. And Sonny Kim, Dark City, where you've actually got some malevolent entity that's trying to get something out of doing all these resets. And then, hold on, Kathy, that's a good one. What if Earth exploded in 2012 and we all died? Yeah, who knows? Maybe I shouldn't have played that joke back on December 21st. I really wish I wouldn't have. Oh, well, some of the things that we regret. But anyways, it's just one of the theories. So we've got end of the world, we've got infinite recursion and time loop, and we've got cycles but new events. So it's ultimately up to you to decide what's really going on. Are we living in cycles but new events? Did we actually have the end of the world and it's all a dream? It's a completely different reality. Or are we stuck in some kind of time loop and we're actually aware of certain events? We know that something happened, but we can't know it for sure. Just like the crew of the Enterprise did. We don't know that Commander Riker gave the right suggestion, and that's how we avoid a simple collision. Now, keep in mind, that's one single decision. The film Donnie Darko is about one single person in one single event. We know there are many more people, there are many more events that are happening. Is it possible that all these events are connected and they overlap? And then suddenly see how complicated this whole concept of time loop really gets. when you run it down to its logical conclusion. Excuse me. Or, as was mentioned earlier, just look up the works of a certain science fiction author, a gentleman who wrote the novel that the film Blade Runner was based upon. That's the one. Oh, there you go, Chris. Thank you very much. Yes, A Scanner Darkly. Or read or watch A Scanner Darkly. Actually, the translation or the film adaptation of that was pretty well done too, in my opinion. Wasn't exactly a live action film, but it didn't need to be. So it'll give you all kinds of ideas of that. Now, for our final topic, what about creating a better world? And why does everyone always consider that crazy talk? And of course, when I say everyone, it's alluded to in many different ways. I mean, why can't we just create a better world? Well, does anybody remember the little dialogue, or the monologue, I should say, from Agent Smith in the original Matrix movie? Yes, the original Matrix movie, in my humble opinion, the best. The one that openly talked about all of the philosophy. And you may recall that what Agent Smith said is, we actually built a perfect world, but you wouldn't accept it. And then he says, it's because you live by one another's misery. That's the world that you'll accept. And then it comes down to this entire attitude. Now, is that really the way that we are, Jamie? Or is that the way that we are inclined to be for whatever reason? Is there something within us that can be incredible and strive to greatness? Or do we just simply prefer to, as Agent Smith says, live by one another's misery? Well, it's a belief system. It's ultimately up to you. But I'm just saying that I find it very interesting that we seem to adapt and go with this concept that, yes, we have to have some kind of system where some people live in misery and we enjoy the people who live in misery for whatever reasons. Or if you want a more on the nose comparison of it, you can read the old novella story, The Ones Who Walk from Omelius. Just read that. It'll tell you what this is all really about. Anyways. And there you go, Carol. Great point. Break the programming and choose for yourself. And that's ultimately what this is all about. And that's what all of us can do. Yeah, Eric, somebody definitely seems to think so, don't they? Question is who? Jamie, that coming from a machine? Yeah, exactly. But let's just take a look. What is our present world like? Well, we talked about on a couple explorations how in what is officially the nation with the largest gross domestic product in the world, therefore technically the wealthiest. Yes, it also has the most debt, but it wouldn't have the most debt if its credit was bad, right? Has an inordinate amount of roads with a lot of potholes in it. Yes, of course, I'm talking about the United States. And it's virtually in every state you'll find a road like this, and some roads that are even worse. And no, this is not a gravel road. This is a paved road, whether you want to say it's paved with asphalt or concrete. But yes, this is the situation that a lot of us are accepting in the United States. This isn't one of the side roads in Iraq that had M1A1 tanks driving on it for a long period of time. Oh, no. This is the United States. So yes, I suppose, and if we're going to accept it in the country that's the wealthiest or officially the wealthiest, then we're going to accept it everywhere, right? And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the old I-35 bridge collapse in Minneapolis and St. Paul, the metro area up there in Minnesota. And that's a more recent constructed section. But don't worry, there's for channel members, you saw that they're taking measures in Minneapolis to ensure that such things like this never happen again. But this did happen, infrastructure collapse. Now, that's the real question I have. How much of our infrastructure is actually from our current era, and how much of it is very, very old? We always look at the dams, and you might be surprised to know how many dams that we have that we're very dependent upon that are very, very old, and you might even classify as old world architecture. Now, if anybody knows where this is, extra points to you, but I mean, this could be a dam anywhere. There were apparently a lot of dams that were constructed during the quote-unquote Great Depression. But after that, we really haven't built a lot of that infrastructure. So I guess you just need one of the worst economic situations in the world, and then you're going to build incredible infrastructure. At least that's what official history will say. And Leo, the great point here, they forgot how to maintain them. Is there not a lot of evidence that indicates to us that somebody forgot to maintain things? Now, the official explanation will be, we just don't have the money. Yeah, that's always the explanation. How can we not have the money? Especially in the United States. We're $30 trillion in debt in the United States. You want to tell me we don't have the money? I'm not buying that, so to speak. But that's just my opinion. I could be completely wrong. And as Jamie says, everything is made to be broken now. And I don't think anybody's going to be building a dam anywhere anytime soon. Again, it's just my opinion. But really, why aren't we building new dams? Why aren't we building new roads? Why isn't every single road pristine? Or, even say 75% of the roads pristine in the United States at least? Why? Don't ask those questions, okay? There's only certain sections. Now, of course, I go back here to Des Moines and looking at the wonderful 801 Grand building. This structure was built in, I think it was 1989, memory serves. I recall watching it grow up. And very, very interesting because it was quite a spotlight on the skyline in Des Moines. And yet, for whatever reason, it still doesn't compare to the Iowa State Capitol. In fact, if you approach Des Moines, the Iowa State Capitol grabs your attention more to the 801 Grand building. It's a nice building. Don't take me wrong. I think it's very much the very best that we can do. But you go on the interior, and there is no comparison with the interior of the Iowa State Capitol. And then, of course, there's this lovely building here in Paris. I don't remember how to pronounce it. The Mount Paris, I think that's how you pronounce it, Mount Paris, Tour Mount Paris, this very interesting monolithic structure on the skyline of Paris, virtually the only skyscraper there. And it's over 50 years old now. You talk to actual residents of Parisian or residents of Paris, they're not very, very fond of it. I can't imagine why. I mean, it's a New World building, right? Leia, that building is hideous. Oh, my goodness. Kathy with a good comment here. A new bridge was just built across the Ohio River, connecting Louisville with southern Indiana. Ah, yeah, that Evansville Bridge. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, we can still do this, but can we do it like we used to? That's what I really wonder. And that's always the question. But yeah, Paris, a city that we traditionally associate with a lot of old world architecture. It's got its own little skyscraper, and people aren't fond of it. Don't worry, though. The New Yorker wrote a very fervent defense of it. And here's the interior. Ah, yes, that lovely current shopping arcade that we have. Nothing says late 20th, 21st century like this layout. And look, maybe you find this wonderful and maybe you enjoy doing this. Hey, I'll admit, I miss going around the old malls and actually seeing people, but that's just me. I'm kind of old school. I'm not afraid to admit it. I've got nothing against Amazon and ordering something that I need right away, but it's just interesting looking at how these buildings work, especially when you compare it to another arcade, an older arcade in Paris. Ah, yes, this is also considered a shopping arcade. Quite a bit of difference, wouldn't you say? And even with some of the Christmas lights that they have hanging here from the windows, you can see that there's a little bit of a difference in the architecture. I love the mosaic floor. Ooh, look at that. Another one of those 8-pointed stars. Well, we see those everywhere, don't we? Huh. But then even looking up here, our favorite little laurel wreath. And yeah, I mean, I guess we have all that Roman influence, don't we? That's what we'll attribute it to. But yeah, that's what an old arcade looks like. So really, at the end, what do we have? What do we know? And Leo says it really well. Night and day difference. Why wouldn't we want to create a better world or make it a better place? Why don't we want to have the old concepts where we actually saw and talked to people? Why is that slowly moving? Well, you could say it's the will of the people. We want to live an easier life. I want to stay in my home. So I'm more than content to have everything delivered to my door. And I'll be honest with all of you. I can see that inclination in all of us, and including myself. But living life, I've also learned there is something to be said for putting out the effort and actually connecting with people, going out and actually doing things. So I know you're thinking, oh my gosh, what the heck's going on here? A YouTube content creator is saying that he's actually lamenting the fact that he doesn't encounter people face to face. I still do. I'm just letting you know that I value it. I value any sort of interaction. I think it's important. And I think that's really the key that we have if we're actually going to build a better world. And I don't think it is crazy talk. I am Kairos. Why build with glory if someone knows the reset date? That's a good point. Or is it because we just don't have the ability anymore? We're doing our best to maintain it and doing our best to replace it wherever we can. Who knows? It could be either explanation. Can't discount either one. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this exploration. Really just looking at some theories. Please hit that like button before you go and support the channel. It was great for everybody to be here and contribute your ideas, and I'm definitely going to read through the comments because I've seen a lot of doozies. I know these tend to go a little bit faster sometimes than we like. But I think what's important to understand is it's not just important to understand where we've been, but also to understand where we're going to be going. Or in other words, look to the future. because I would like to believe that we do still have a future. Hey, Brother Adam, good to see you. Hope all's going well. So anyway, I hope all of you have a wonderful week wherever you're on the land. Please hit the like button before you go, and we'll see you on the explorations coming up this week. And I think we'll do another live stream next weekend because I'm really enjoying these, and I hope you're enjoying them too. But either way, thanks for being here. Thank you for supporting the channel. And everybody, take care of yourself. This is Lucius Aurelian signing off.